this. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Jessie. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessie Simpson. So I am the Engineering Research and Scholarly Initiatives Librarian. So I help with graduate and faculty research primarily, but that also includes scholarly metrics, some data wrangling type stuff. Lots of, well, wear lots of different hats. So let's see, I have a presentation here for you today, and so I spoke a little bit about this, which is this kind of literature review is going to fall within the realm of a systematic review. So a systematic review is an umbrella term for a variety of different reviews, right? So but the one thing that makes it stand apart from, say, perhaps a different type of review is that it is a methodical, as in it has method. There is a prescriptive method that is recorded while you're doing this review, right? So so I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I would like to change slides, but oh, there we go. There. So I want to thank Margaret Foster for basically the content that I'm delivering today. So here are, basically I've cherry picked this content from her very, very extensive multi-part sessions on systematic reviews, as well as making reference to her ebook. So this is the ebook that she has written. Well, it's also in print. So you can access this at the university library and get more information about systematic reviews in general. Okay. So in your assignment, you've been instructed to take a look at Human Factors, the Journal of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society. So we're gonna take a look at we're going to look at multiple types of reviews: narrative reviews, scoping reviews, and systematic reviews. I'm going to show you how you can search for all of those things. But you're going to choose probably, I'm thinking the best suited one, just from the way that I understand how this assignment works. You'll probably do something that looks most closely to like a scoping review. So that's what I'm guessing for this. Okay, so I'm also going to show you some library guides that will help you when you're doing writing this paper. So there's the citing and writing sort of overarching resources, but especially the latest edition of APA, as well as you have a link there in the assignment that talks about how to do citations, right? So so we're going to first talk about three main types of systematic reviews. So the first is a narrative review, which is an overview of a topic. It summarizes critical points of current knowledge of a particular topic, so expert opinion supported by facts. The next one is a scoping review, which is a framework to map key concepts, types of evidence, and gaps in research. It can also formalize jargon or language within a specific sphere, so following or tracking a particular usage of phrasing. And then you have systematic review. So this is a research method that aims to answer questions by analyzing studies and meeting specific criteria. So it's a study of studies. And then you have an additional subset, say like a meta-analysis and so on and so forth. So, but these are the big sort of overarching set of things in this review. So what I'm going to do now, I'm not going to stop sharing, but I would like to pull up let's see, is there a way to pull up a browser?
Yeah, press escape. By the way, I just emailed these guys, so it'll probably show up.
Let's go ahead and pull up a browser. We're going to pull this up. We'll start at the TAMU library. Okay, so we're gonna go to libraries. And very conveniently, this is actually very easy to find in terms of you know, different journals. So let's see, we're gonna go to this. I'm just gonna take this and copy and paste it. So I'm searching for this particular title. And it's going to be the first result that turns up, which is always nice. So here we have this item in our catalog. I'm going to go ahead and look at the catalog record. And here we're going, so we have this available and in physical copies, but we're going to look for the full text. So this is called a link resolver. I'm going to click on the link resolver. Let's sign in. Oh, this is going to take a second because I have to authenticate, don't I?
Students know this is like what I do for like 15% of all my classes.
All right, so you no other people use this device, but okay. So now what we're going to be taking a look at hopefully is okay. So this is so I mean you go ahead and pick your vendor, but Sage is going to be great. So we're going to go ahead and click on Sage as the vendor preferred vendor for this. You can see all these other ones that we could also opt for under this circumstance. I'm going to use Sage. So this is Sage Journals, and it's already linking to search this journal. So that's very convenient. So we are now searching all of the editions of this particular journal, and I'm going to use a keyword phrase. And so going back to this presentation here, we want to take a look at the three main types of these things. So we're going to look for a narrative review, a scoping review, and systematic reviews, right? So let's go ahead and do okay, so and if you're like me, I am not the best at spelling. I was born in a spell check world, into a spell check world. So if you, a note about this, if you forget an N, for example, here, that is going to be a problem. So this is keyword phrase searching. It's not going to correct for that. It's going to look for it exactly. So make sure you got your spelling correct. And then watch me misspell it. So a narrative review. Oops. No, I think you can do that. Let's try that again. It's still thinking about it. So while that thinks about it, we're gonna, here, let's see if, did I somehow we lose? That's not good.
That's the journal's fault, isn't it?
All right, so let's try scoping review. All right, great. So that seemed to work pretty well. So we've got scoping review. There's 4 results for a scoping review, and we're going to do systematic review. Okay, so there's 66 results for systematic review. So now what you can do is you can take a look, and there are narrative reviews. I checked that for this narrative. Ta-da! It worked this time. So if you want an example of some of these different types of reviews, take a look. So click on them. So what does a narrative review look like? Click on it, scroll through. You'll see how a narrative review is laid out. Do a scoping review. You'll see the different examples of that, and the same thing with systematic review. So take a look at the different things that are there. Also, while we're here, we're going to go back to the library. We're going to look at the guides, and particularly the citing guides. So you can do APA, certainly, citations, but I'm going to do citing. And here's citing your sources. But there's also, I think, a comprehensive citing guide here. Let's go ahead and do ALA or APA, excuse me, APA. So APA citation, and here's your citing and writing set of guides. So As you can see, there's lots of different guides that you have accessible. So APA does not offer an ebook version. So that's unfortunate, but you can really get lots of help. So here's all of the different online style guides. So you don't necessarily need the guide. Most of these things are sometimes they're even better explained in some of these style guides in terms of explanations of how to do particular more complicated types of citations. So do take a look at those. We do have these physical publications. So if you click on that, you'll see where to find those in the library. You can get those in print. But also, we have things like RefWorks and EndNote, where you can use the cite while you write software. So that'll automatically format those citations for you while you're doing your citing as well. So so keep those different tools in mind as you're using that and employ those to help you with your bibliography. Okay, so and then I don't know, does Covidence have its own? Does anyone does it have a citation sort of manager? Yes.
I was talking about Covidence. Yeah, it manages.
So it does it has like a bibliographic references feature.
I'm not sure if it does, but you have to link it to a citation manager. So
oh, you still have to link it to a citation manager.
Okay. I don't know if you can get it directly from there, but I just put it to my Zotero library and then from there.
Okay.
But when I edit the documents.
So you use Zotero. Yes.
Well, generally how I've used Covidence is you set up Covidence, you have it export to something like EndNote and then
EndNote, and then use EndNote as your tool, right? So those are a couple of different pathways to using the citation in text or the in text features. So look for those as well. All right, so then let's get into it. So we've kind of covered a few bases. Okay, so we're going to talk about the pieces method. So when you're going into and approaching a new topic, we're going to use the pieces message. So first we'll plan, we'll frame the question, determine the criteria, establish a project management plan, and we create our team. So, and particularly when you're doing these reviews, professionally, there's a sort of inter-rater reliability aspect to these, but you'll be working on these individually. So so I'm not sure exactly, consult your instructor on those differences. Okay, so then do search terms. So identify your search terms, select resources, retrieve and document, and deduplicate. So this is actually sort of where you're after you've kind of found your topic and started to refine your terms, you're going to identify. Then you evaluate. So screen, select, sort, appraise, then collect and code, then explain or analyze your findings, then summarize. And I guess that lopped off my E there, sorry about that. Okay, so we're talking about organizing your topic. So what are you researching? What kind of review are you conducting? What deadlines do you need to meet? What is the ultimate goal? So for example, if you're doing a scoping review and you start to explore a particular topic and it turns out that there might be thousands and thousands of different articles on a particular topic, if you want to minimize the amount of effort, you might consider a refinement of that. So instead of doing, say, everything on a particular area, focus on a sub area of that thing that you're interested in. So so consider that when you're doing that. So what is the ultimate goal, and what have you already found? So when you're starting to look at these different topics, playing around, starting to adjust your keywords, what makes sense to you? What keywords keep on coming up? You know, maybe you want to start integrating or shifting the vocabulary that you're using. Where are you going to store this? What kind of management system do you have in place for keeping files, for keeping your for your documents straight, for sharing with group members. Sort of lay your groundwork so that you have a good working space. So what is the plan to review the topic or materials? What are the standards that you're going to be using? So are you going to be using a protocol like Prisma or some other type of protocol? Who will be on the team? And what software are you going to use? Okay, so then determine feasibility. So decide which review method is appropriate. Is it a narrative? Is it a scoping? Is it a systematic review? Is it a meta-analysis? Then define the scope of the review. So then find and evaluate related reviews. So look and see what else is out there. See that if there is something that's very similar to the topic that you're already embarking on. So then estimate the number of potential citations. So important. So I think I just kind of touched on this. And then determine the feasibility. So scoping some of these systematic reviews, depending on the size of them, can be multiple years long. Very large studies can be conducted on large sets of information on broad topics, right? So determine whether your topic is going to fit within the timeline that you need to have a deliverable, right? So
You can be consulting with your advisors on that too, because you guys likely haven't done anything of this scope before. But I have seen submitted reports which include, after we go through all the steps here, maybe like 20 articles. And I've seen submissions that include like 400 articles. So 400 would be a high end. And if you think about, you're going to read these and write about them by September 1st. That's probably more than you want to try to do at this point. But it's just something to be conversed with the advisors, kind of what's a good scope there.
okay.
Thanks.
Okay, definitely.
But I mean, are you technically like clearing them as you go? Because you do abstract review first, correct?
That's right.
But then from those you get like
You made
1,000, you keep like 50, for example.
Yes, I mean, it's different for every case, and that's why I don't say, hey, you should have this many articles in it. It's you will document why you ended up with that specific number. It's really a lot of work to show this is why I have all of the world and I'm narrowing it down to this. And once you've scoped your search terms and you've gone through the process of, yes, you know, abstract review, it starts with title review usually, abstract review is a later step. And then, yeah, but it might be your final list includes hundreds. Yeah.
So you're gonna start off with a pool of X size, and then you create your inclusion and exclusion criteria. So you should be thinking about not just what I'm including, but what I am not including, and you want to document that. You want to say, I have decided for the purposes of this study that I am only sticking with, you know, English speaking, languages or what have you. And then there's, we'll talk about this in a little bit, then there's inherent biases. And then it's up to you to address that, right? It would be incumbent on you as the person writing that analyzation, you know, these are all in English and these are some potential impacts that could be the outcome, right, of having made that limitation. But that would be in the last part of your paper where you're talking about how that impacted the outcome. So so determine feasibility. So that's an important, it's all in positioning yourself. This upfront stuff is really important. It's going to be a lot more time consuming than you think before you're even getting into the meat of the papers, right? So just getting yourself set up for success. So you want to take a good look at what's out there and what your approach is. Okay, scoping reviews. So aim to map rapidly the key concepts underpinning a research area and the main sources and types of evidence available. So we're going to plan, identify, evaluate, code, and explain. So what is the scope? What is the research question? And what is the eligibility criteria? Which we've already started talking about a little bit. In here, let me just go ahead and go back to the slideshow and play from the current slide. Okay, so So we're going to go and we're going to review the databases. We're going to run our protocol on the databases. We're going to use subject-specific databases. So we're going to select, usually with the aid of your advisor, which databases would be good, but also a librarian is great to talk to on this matter as well. Yes.
Is there a distinct protocol for selecting databases?
So it depends. So it depends on where you're approaching this. Different fields or different disciplines have different expectations or standards on protocols. So for example, if you're kinesiology, you might employ a protocol, you know, a little bit differently than you would in medicine, for example. So originally these protocols come from medicine. And medicine is very, very specific and procedural about lots of things. So I would say that they have a very strict concept and adherence to protocols, and they especially have a very specific taxonomy of language that they use called mesh headings. You may find that that does not serve you in multidisciplinary databases. You will inherently have to modify your search strategies. So for example, you may use a wildcard in, say, a PubMed. You're going to have to limit yourself to 9 truncation items in IEEE, right? So that's just inherently built into the database itself. Right, so these things are going to change the way that you approach a particular query. But yes, I would say Prism, and then there's different versions of, say, Prisma or Prisma. I think Prisma S, and then there's and then all of these protocols can be registered. So you can actually register new protocols in protocol databases. So if you wanted like a laundry list of all the different protocols, you could go and start like looking at different people's protocols. So yeah, I would advise you to look at the human factors and use that as a starting point for making your decision on that. So yeah. Okay. So keep terms broad, and then look at smaller group of articles and look for, so protocol databases, subject specific databases, and then you may even include dissertation and theses databases as well. So it depends on what kind of approach you're taking. You may, and again, you know, this could or couldn't include conference papers, for example. You know, that would be up to you to decide if you want to exclude that from your criteria, for example. Or you might just be looking at, you know, certain types of things. So, okay, so once you've decided on a question, first you want to ask, is there a review like this? Has someone done this before? If there was one that was done in the last 5 years and it was done well, then you want to come up with a new topic. If there hasn't been something recent, then maybe you need to update that review, because these kinds of reviews should cover what we know about the literature, and 5 years is a good heuristic for when a review might be considered to be done again, right? But if it's not the same, then or there are no reviews, then you can move forward with that as a topic. So okay, so this is an example. So this is an example of, say, the exploratory process of doing a search in PubMed. So this is using specifically mesh headings. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up. So I'm going to do a stop share, and we're going to try this in Web of Science, for example. Oops, sorry, you guys are watching. Okay, so here we're going to go to the university libraries, and we're going to see what this looks like. Give you a sort of an example of how this might go. We're going to go to advanced search, or sorry, no, we're going to go to databases. Sorry, databases, back up, databases. And we're going to start with Web of Science. Okay. So, so let's do, and I wish I had done a little bit more, let's actually take a look at some of the, does someone want, here, can someone help me out a little bit? Where are we gonna start our searching at? A topic,
Autonomous vehicle.
autonomous vehicle, great, thank you.
Hmm? Just came from the previous, my thinking of the previous seminar talk we were just at.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, so autonomous vehicle or Tesla, right? So we're gonna start there, we're gonna start our search. So now we have sort of a baseline of a lot of publications. So let's start refining this, right? So we have our major and minor topics here. So let's start taking a look at possible refinements that we might make to this based on major topic. So I'm especially interested in automation and control systems, right? So now we have added that to our search. And then, so now we're gonna start, so this is now limiting it to 1,857 results. So now we're gonna start to take modeling predictive control, decision-making frameworks, right? So now let's see, so if I wanted to go to, where's my advanced search? So let's go to our search history and let's go to advanced search. And so now we start to see how this query is, so we can add these different things. So add this to my query, and then combine it and let's see, control systems, right? I'm going to use a keyword phrase. So now, oops. Invalid use of a Boolean operator. Make sure that's, sorry, what? So yeah, it added this, it should have been adding, so. I'm not sure why that didn't work.
It is the type of bracket you're using.
Maybe it should be this square bracket.
So I'm gonna go back to this. We're gonna just edit. Okay. Saving up.
Wait, spelling.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure why this is, okay. Oh, because they've got a parentheses here. So here. I've got too many parentheses. All right. Just system error. Okay, discard. Going back to the search history.
It looked good. Yeah.
Basically, my point is that you can, once you start working with these different things, you can start adding them as different sets together. So when you do your search, sure. Of course, there's no results there. But then you want to go to your history and you want to search this particular, so we're going to add this one to our search and we're going to add this one to our search. I don't know what kind of results we end up getting there to combine searches, sorry. So we're going to add 1 and 4 and add this to my query. Combine sets with an and. Okay, now we're going to search this. Okay, so now it should be, it says invalid query. And I'm not really sure why it's check the time span. What's wrong with my date range? Yeah, all years. Well, so clearly it looks a lot better in the PubMed option. So basically you're getting you're getting the same sort of. So what they're doing is they're expanding. You start with some mesh headings. There's some control vocabulary. You add a couple of things together. You refine by that. Then say you maybe add another different type of thing. So it starts to evolve. You're basically, the concept is that you're building up from one topic and you're expanding. You start combining terms into sets, right? Or sets of phrases. And as you go, so starting from the top, so you get a lot of results, and then you start basically. So this is say the history of a search, and then you end up with some sort of refinements that are going to end up being your final choice on the query that you choose for this particular database. Now, when you start to go to translate that to another database, you're going to end up having to mess with it, but obviously, as demonstrated in the Web of Science, the syntax gets adjusted a little bit as you go from database to database. Also, the controlled vocabulary, so there is no mesh in Web of Science. There's meso and there's major and minor headings, right? As far as the taxonomy is concerned. So those kinds of things start to change as well, right? So your outcome then is a little bit, the search actually is inherently different. It becomes different based on your database that you're querying. Okay, so but you want to document all of the things that you're doing or performing in a given database in terms of your query, your final query string. All right, so with your now once you have your inclusion, your things that you've decided, you start to customize your scope of and create keywords. And start reviewing these and looking for how these are appearing in the results that you found. Okay, so then this is talking a little bit more about, so what type of review are you doing? A narrative review, a scoping review, a mapping review? Are you looking at quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods, umbrella review? Do you want to do a rapid review? What type of question are you trying to answer? Costs, diagnosis, prognosis, policy. Is it a risk evaluation? And then there's other types of reviews as well. So, and here's a little bit about registering your protocols. We talked a little bit about this. So Prospero is an organization for registering these. CREF, JBI, BJM. And as you can see, a lot of these have, so this will be related to education, crime, justice, etc. But you'll see a lot of health related registrations, right? So, and that's just because this type of method is heavily employed in healthcare settings. Okay. Though I suspect that will change as more and more fields and start to adopt a specific type of strategy for doing these kinds of reviews. So, all right. So then create a table of the reviews. So you can do the question and where this is coming from, and then talk about the impact or the type of review that you're trying to do and the outcomes that you're getting. And There's different types of software that you can employ for this. So file storage software. So where are you going to keep all of these papers, especially if you have thousands of them? This is a very big issue. Also, you need to be conscientious about limitations based on copyright. So you can't, as Aaron found out, you can't just, go into an MIT closet and download all of JSTOR. That's kind of a no-no. They come after you for that. So be aware of what kind of quantities you're collecting, right? Because those could have implications. Also, citation management. We talked a little bit about that. Review software. So we mentioned Covidence, but there are other ones as well. Data coding, project management systems, especially for your very large endeavors. What kind of file types and file saving that you want to do. So keeping those in a similar format, say deciding on comma separated values as opposed to some other delineation, for example. And then how are you going to select, have a program in place for the people on the team and a communication plan? Okay. So here are the different types of examples of different types of questions: effectiveness, quantitative, cost, economic, prevalence, diagnostic, risk, prognostic, methodology, and the aims, the question format, and the examples, which we saw in a previous slide. So here is Prisma for scoping reviews. So this is the Prisma protocol, and it's linked here. So here's one. And I'm gonna get this wrong. I think it's Is it Rayan? So this is one of the tools that you can use. It's like Covidence. So it has advantages to. So as you can see, it's on like multiple different types of devices, and you can download it from the App Store, for example. So when you're developing a search, you want to find the previous relevant searches, list the database, use search terms, and design your search strategy, evaluate and modify, document the processes that you're going through, and then translate that search. So looking for related reviews. And this is, so I think we already went through some other things. So these are the ones Margaret Foster is recommending in terms of looking at methodology. Okay, so then you want to list your database. So start with the most relevant, and then list in order of relevance and then size. So look at previous reviews for lists of databases. Talk to a librarian to check on that. Talk to your advisor. Those are all different places. Look at guides. So library guides will often have sets of databases, and you don't have to stick with Tammuz. You can look in other places as well. So library guides are common throughout the basically universities across the nation. So take a look at what sort of resources are being recommended, and particularly in institutions that are specializing in the topic that you're considering. So look at the scope of the databases and consider interface differences, like I mentioned. So for example, truncation problems, what you might run into in terms of translating queries, and how frequently the database updates. So you can run into problems when you've done a search, and you're in the midst of something, and now you started a process, and so you'll get a lot of you'll get an update in the midst of it, and that can throw off what kind of results that you're getting from a particular search. How and consider what you might do if you're in like a 2-year study and something like that and a shift occurs. You go back and redo all of that stuff that you did, or check it against that or do you move forward with the set that you originally found? Okay, so determine your eligibility criteria. So collect terms, use keywords, use thesaurus terms, and consider what sort of limitations you're wanting to put on anything, or what you might guess. What's that?
What's the number 3? What does that mean?
Thesaurus. So a thesaurus is something, so when you're looking, so similar terms basically, and these can be terms that you are looking or cherry picking from the actual articles. So when you're doing your initial look at something, you want to, so there's actual like literal thesauruses that you can go. There's literal thesauruses, but there's also things that you can do while you're in a particular search, where you go and you say, you're looking at a particular article, for example, say this one, and you go and you start to look and you see keyword phrases so there's author supplied keywords, and these are actually going to be giving you insights into any shifts in language. And in fact, when you're doing a taxonomic analysis, these are where you get jargon changes, right? So this is where the language is evolving, whether it's become multidisciplinary, and so now you're getting a combination of linguistic expressions that are evolving into a new area, or if you're getting so this is where you pick up those sorts of new things. So for example, micromobility, right, doesn't really exist in a dictionary, doesn't really exist in in spell check, right? But it's basically personal electronic vehicles, right? So that would be an example of something that is a recent evolution of the language, which you would see in author keywords, which you might not see in, say, the keywords plus, which is the major and minor topics. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
So just to confirm, your thesaurus terms are effectively a list of synonyms that are similar to the
Synonyms, exactly.
Okay.
A thesaurus term would be a list of synonyms based on some standard. Now, whether that standard is, you don't have to necessarily do that. This would be part of your process as you're going through keywords and trying to refine your search. But yes, certainly you could look at a thesaurus in terms of like looking for similar terms, but that's not going to be as helpful when you're talking about a field of study. Right, so you and the people in your area, and these kinds of things are going to give you insights into what those terms are, what those connected terms are, unless there's actually someone who's done a taxonomic analysis, and then you need a taxonomist. Okay. Yes, all right, so and that might be what you're aiming to accomplish with a systematic review, right? You want to do it, you're ultimately ending and trying to end up with a taxonomic analysis. All right, so okay, so consider limits. And one of the things that I want to point out in terms of considering limits, so when you're employing the word not, for example, so limiters, right, can be used as operators. So say limiting by a field, so an author, right, that would be a limiter within a field of metadata. But when you're doing limiting such as using Boolean not, you want to be careful, because using not can, so for example, this is the one I like to share is, let's say you're getting lots of you're doing research on mothers. But you're getting lots of confounding research related to children. Now, if you say not child, you are going to eliminate children and mothers from your search, right? So you want to be very careful that when you're using the not Boolean operator, then you're not actually getting rid of some very valuable research on mothers. Clearly that one is the obvious one, but that's subtle, right? So when you're doing those kinds of things, you want to, so sometimes maybe you want to employ a not within a meta field, right? So maybe that is actually where you want to make that refinement instead of broadly. So it may depend also on the tagging. So for example, EBSCO and like PubMed and other stuff actually has a descriptive field where it allows you to limit by child and allows you to limit where the subject of study is the mother or the subject of study is the child. They have those limiters, so make sure to include those and know your and you know that by knowing your database, right? So how do I know that? It's because I know that that's available in some particular databases, constraining by a particular subject type in terms of participant focus. So those are things to keep in mind. So let's go back to view play from current slide. Okay. Also structure. So consider your topic of interest when you're structuring your search. Apply it. So, is there an intervention that you're taking a look at in particular medical, and consider your study design. So you could try to limit by, say, experimental design, or you may or observational or case study, right? Or there's other types of ways that you want to take a look at the different types of items. So consider those different types of experimental designs and focusing on a type of experimental design in your search. Okay. So collect terms as your search progresses, which I think we've already, kind of talked about. So look at related reviews. Consider international variations on terms or variations between disciplines. And this is kind of one of those areas that I talked about. And I unfortunately don't have a really good example, but you might find confounding terms in terms of when you're using a particular phrase. So it might mean something in engineering, but then when you do a search in a medical database, you get something that's very different, right? And it's actually the same phrase or the same word. So, just be mindful that you're going to get different results based on the sphere of focus that you're in. Okay. Also, there's historical changes. So like I was just talking about, the words or the things might change over time. Whereas, you might have had, an area that used to be neonatal care, and now it's becoming, what was a good example? Maternal, like there was anyways, so there, phrases or focuses evolve and change over time to encompass different types of research, but they may also have encompass a umbrella over a topic that was narrower in a previous time. So, okay. So also when you're doing when you're doing advanced searching, remember to use these different types of search features, truncations. So wildcards. So the difference between a truncation and a wildcard is, so a wildcard so generally you use wildcards to perform truncation, but you can also use wildcards as a standalone. So for example, I'm just gonna pull up so when you're doing let's go back to my history. Autonomous vehicle testing, right? You want to go, you could go and testing, tested, test. So that would be an example of a truncation, right? And you are using a wildcard as a truncation tool, but wildcards can also be stand-ins. So for example, if you had this as a standalone, it could be an entire word, right? So it depends on your database whether or not that will understand that as an entire word, or it will understand it as a prefix or suffix, or as a single character. Yes.
So how do they help? Like if I'm, because we're supposed to be really clear with our terms, correct? So how's it?
Right. Right. So instead of having to write, so this would be a way that I would do this. And so this one might be how I would write it in IEEE if I ran out of truncation options, right? Because I have 9 of them. so test, and sometimes databases will do this automatically, or they'll pluralize automatically. But so testing and tested and so most ones do tests. So fortunately, we don't have to pluralize. Most databases will automatically pluralize, but that's what that looks like without a truncation, right? So if we want to truncate,
You probably want ors for those, right?
oh, sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Or, my bad. Absolutely. You're totally right about that. So that would be or. So, or tests. Instead of doing any of those, you know, we go test, right? And then I'm trying to think, there's one that they like to give in terms of like an internal wildcard, where you actually, so you can actually use it as an internal item for a letter to take the place of a letter. But then when you get into, so I don't know that it will work here, but like, so what is this being? The quick wildcard fox, jumped up, the quick brown, but what other kind of the quick? So this would be the brown fox, but the ugly blank, the ugly blank, I better watch out. But the ugly something, you know, movie, the ugly blank movie. So maybe I want to constrain this to in title. The ugly something review movie, the ugly, so. Sometimes you do these searches and you don't know what you're gonna get. So basically what this is supposed to be doing is producing things that are the keyword phrase, but it has a wildcard in terms of a replacement of an entire word, right? So those are examples of wildcards. Okay, so going back to my presentation. Proximity searching, so that's stuff, so there's and this will be noted differently depending on the database that you're using, but this is like within certain amount of characters, so, or within certain amount of words. So you say some of them will be like a W/, and some will actually say within. You have to type out within 5. And then that'll give you the amount of words that those two things. That's good for text searching when you're looking for things that are associated instead of having things that are drawing out, and that'll increase your relevance, right? So you can do things like that. Phrase searching, which we've already gone through, especially keyword phrase searching with exact phrase, and other types of punctuation. So, okay. And how are we doing on time? We're still,
It's 4 o'clock and I had said an hour and a half, but it's,
okay,
I don't know how strict that needs to be.
okay.
Yeah, not on my sake, so, yeah.
So, so you develop your search, then you test the first, so this is a strategy or approach. You develop a search, then you maybe test a first set of 50 citations. Then you decide, okay, this is working for me, and then you continue with that and start over with a formal process, or you update that search and shift or change, add additional words based on basically what you're finding. Okay, so also use press, so have someone look at your search. So this would be peer review of electronic search strategies. So this would be helpful in terms of so you go to a librarian, or you go to, say, and maybe your advisor can help with this, where they translate the search that you have in a particular database to another database. Maybe they can make recommendations in terms of how you're structuring your Boolean, advise you on subject headings that you could add, adjust your spelling syntax, and recommending limits and filters. So for example, like the one I pointed out, say, someone who might know that you can, or you just may not have thought about, using a particular limiter. And so having someone take a second glance at it in an area that where they might be familiar with a particular topic can be helpful. Most universities have subject specialized librarians who are familiar with the databases that you're using. So they're a great resource. Okay. So this is requirements for a Cochrane review. And so for Cochrane reviews, you need to have the database name, the database host. So for example, Sport Discus is a name of a database for exercise, health, and kinesiology. And then the host would be EBSCO, right? So EBSCO has tons and tons and tons and tons of databases, but EBSCO is the host of that particular database. You record the date of the search, you address the years that you are covering in your search, you put your search terms, you add any language restrictions, and you can save these. So this is a tip. Do a save. So once you have the databases that you're going to select, create a profile in that database and save it. So put it so that way when you're returning to that database, then you can just go to your saved or favorite queries and then run it, right? So then you're not having to recreate that every time. So also note that when you close a browser, say like in Web of Science that I was just in, it's going to get rid of all of that search history. So if you wanted to save that search, make sure that you've somehow kept it in some way, right? So that search history will also disappear when the browser is closed. Oh yeah, and print screen. So that's another way. So just do a screen print and then you can see the path. So like the one that we saw earlier when she was performing a systematic, so when she was adjusting for her terms with the mesh headings in PubMed, then you can actually do a print screen and then see the evolution of a particular search as well. So go to your history and do your print screen and then you can see what pathway you had followed for that particular line of inquiry. Okay, then rinse and repeat and do it again. So then evaluates. This is the final. So this is getting to actually looking at the content that you've found. So first do your screening by title abstract and identify relevance. then select by full text. So look to match by all criteria that you've created. So at this point, you have your selection criteria. You may not have fully developed your exclusion criteria, but you want to make sure to solidify that as soon. And if you have started applying exclusion criteria in that, then you want to make sure you go back and apply that to the ones that you've already done. So try as well as you can to try to predict what types of exclusion criteria you will also be using, because otherwise you're going to be rehashing the same sort of materials again. So sort into study type if that's important for you. So make sure your experimental ones are all together, your case ones are all together in terms of the, that can be a helpful way to organize the type of content that they have. And then evaluate your risk of bias. So for example, if you're working with a lot of English language papers, there's known to be inherent bias for lots of confirming review or confirming experimental results, and as opposed to another language where you might see more disconfirming results, right? So it depends on, so for example, in this culture in particular, there's a high incentive to only publish when you have confirming results and not when you have disconfirming results. So just keep in mind those kinds of biases as well. Determine your screening method, how many people are going to be involved, usually at least 2, but perhaps there's more, and you want to make sure that everybody's on board with what's going on. How do they get divided? Who does what? What software are you going to use? How do you disagree? How do you settle disagreements when the inter-rater reliability doesn't check out? So, and then also make sure that you train as a group and determine how your frequency for meeting. These are possible screening tools. So I think this stuff is probably not as relevant to you, because you're not going to be doing independent evaluators. Yes.
So I was going to ask, because a lot of these slides are kind of framed in doing a literature review in a group. So you have multiple evaluators, you have multiple team members.
Right.
You will not be doing that for qualifier.
That sounds like it. Is that correct?
Say that one more time, sorry.
This lecture tends to have a lot of framing where we're doing this as a group, as a team. But our literature reviews for the qualifier are just solo.
Correct.
Okay.
You're correct.
So yeah, so that would be, so typically scoping systematic reviews in general require, most protocols require inter-rater reliability, at least on at least one other evaluator. So that helps basically establish that you have inter-rater reliability on an agreement on what is and isn't included and excluded, right? So, and if you start to see a lot of disagreements, then that means that you haven't defined your inclusion and exclusion criteria very well, right? So you need to go back and revisit that and address it. Okay. So this is an example of a Prisma flowchart. This is an example of, so publication bias are when results of published studies are systematically different from unpublished studies. And this is a meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is when you basically are evaluating different sets and evaluating them for a particular type of bias. And so these are examples of bias results in meta-analysis when evaluating a set of studies. So I think I've already said that, significant results are more likely to be published in English. So, let's see. Okay, so challenges, lacking access. This is a big one. So this has actually been, this was hugely, so by the way, last I checked, we are no longer, we don't, so we have a contract problem going on in terms of negotiating compendex, for example. So this is a major impact on engineering for, well, sorry.
Oh God, because appendix is a big one.
Right?
Yeah.
So disclaimer, that is not the library's negotiation issue. That's a problem that's in contracts right now. And is that still not available? Still not available.
I mean, it was working 6 months ago.
So lacking access, major issue, right? In terms of these are unpredicted challenges. So now if you're doing a scoping review, say, or a systematic review in engineering, you may have to pause, or you might have to shift your priority to a different database, or it could just hold up your productivity. Yes.
Do we have any insider info? Anything that's gonna get solved?
No, it's not up to it's out of the library's hands. I apologize. I'm so sorry.
No, but just
I have no insights into what's going on in the contract negotiation. Yes.
Is there any way that, I don't know, like a reallocation of funding, if you need to get into compendex, can you buy like a personal license to it?
I would assume that could be negotiated with a vendor. You probably shouldn't hear this, but some people have access from other institutions based on former relationships, teams. So this is another good reason to have teams that are interinstitutional. Yes. That's what he was just asking. So I would assume that there's something available, but I mean, if you're coming out of your pocket for that, I don't know. I would argue that you might just put that as a limitation.
yeah.
In this circumstance. And that's, I mean, I don't know how, there are other options in terms of databases that could be searched.
Yeah,
So-
I'm just biased. My bias with it because I mean I like appendix a lot. I use it for
No, absolutely highly critical. And so when you're talking about this, so one of the ones that we end up seeing, that I end up seeing a lot, even though Web of Science is a good stand-in, so Scopus and Web of Science. So then the question is, well, so then what's the difference? And the answer is the way that they develop the relevancy, right? So when you're doing a query in Web of Science, you get a different result when you add that same query to Scopus. How do they evaluate, or how do they perform the algorithm in order to provide those results, right? So, and some people, are like Web of Science is my thing. Other fields, it's like Scopus all the way. And if you're not subscribing to, so they cover roughly, they're both indexers of roughly the same journal. In fact, I think they must cross compare their holdings, right? So it's a little over 20,000 journals in the same one. So they index the same stuff. It's just how are they finding that what is the algorithm? And they both are transparent about that, unlike Google Scholar, who isn't, and they don't have to be because they're Google Scholar. And really, I'll tell you what, they're not discriminatory at all. So that's how Google Scholar does it, is and so actually known item searching is really great for Google Scholar, but I'm getting down on down a rabbit hole and on a soapbox. All right. Yes. So also time is a major player, right? So how much time do you have to perform that? So that can really limit what you can do. Your team is not willing. Your team has said, no way, we're not going through 7,000 articles. So you just can't get other people to commit to that kind of size. So, maybe you still want to keep that research team and negotiate something more suitable to their ability to participate. So issues that you can't export those to citation tools, and then there can be difficult once you start to go. So we talked about different, like having to go back and forth or redo things based on a new set of criteria, that it can become, keeping track of what you're doing or doing it in a systematic way can become burdensome. And at a certain point, maybe you decide, okay, we're just going to go ahead, we're going to forge ahead with this, even though we know that there's a known issue, and you just bring that up in your discussion, right? Say, this was something that cropped up, and this is how it was handled. So we decided that, that this would still be included or something like that. So, but documenting all of that can be very burdensome. So keeping track of your processes and your methods. So when do you stop too? So when do you say this is really a lot, and maybe we want to start over, or when to abandon a particular project. Something that didn't come up. So when to stop searching. So have you identified? So here's a good kind of rules of when to stop searching. Have you identified and searched all reference databases likely to contain a significant number of citations? Have you verified that there are no systematic biases of omission, such as non-English languages or sources of gray literature? Have you conducted author searches on 3 to 4 of the most prolific authors on a topic? And have you modified your search strategy by adjusting search terms as that you identified and examined citations relevant to your topic? So those are perhaps a set of, so when you can answer those questions, then you feel that you've done a comprehensive job. Okay, so now this is the coding aspect. So draft a list of characteristics that are coded in your materials. Consider how each will be coded. Select your software, develop a form that you're going to do the coding in, determine your methods for, so establish your protocol in terms of your method. So test that form, run it a few times through some articles and make sure that it's covering the content that you need, and edit it. And then you go through all the studies and check iterator reliability, or you do that in batches, right? So you do it in chunks. So tips for coding: write out all the relevant info. So avoid abbreviations if you can, but if you do decide to do abbreviations, make sure everyone's on the same page. So maybe have a glossary, or if you're encountering lots of abbreviations, have something that you can use to counter reference in that as well, so that it makes it easy for your team. So flexible enough for interesting information. So make sure that your coding allows you to include the stuff that you're interested in, and puts that information in the best form for synthesis and analysis, so that you can go through and have findings, so you could say comprehensively that what you found. So yeah. So example of a coding explanation. 2 reviewers use standardized form adapted from Cochrane to extract data from included studies, using the template for intervention, description, replication checklists, and identified key elements of interventions. Who delivered the intervention? How much, so how, where, when, how much was done, what tailoring modifications were made to the intervention. Also extracted the study design, the setting, the population characteristics, the intervention design and duration, outcome measured, and major findings. And focused in Latin America, right? So this is an example of a coding explanation. Okay. So break down the characteristics into individual components. So you could do method, study type, length of study, etc. So so here's just some tips. Test the form. This is talking about meta-analysis in terms of combinable data when you're coming up with, when you're basically taking n sample. So you created some inclusion criteria. You found the vector by which you can create the equivalency of those populations. So you take n plus n, right? So it's or n plus say x, and you can say that we are now doing a review on this entire population as though it was one population based on this set of criteria, right? So that would be and then that would be combinable. So this is an example of a coding form. So then you explain and summarize. So here's some frameworks that based on the review type for how you can express the different types of reviews that you've designed. So we've already kind of talked about this. A final thing, you want to discuss authorship before you get, so when you're working with multiple people, create a memo of understanding and understand that in different disciplines there's different expectations for authorship. So also, so and you know, when you're including someone that's like doing going to be evaluating all of those, make sure that you understand who's, say, first author, second author, etc. Does the person that you consulted, typically you don't have to include a librarian unless they're actually starting to go through the papers and doing analysis with you. But you know, so when you do just like a simple consultation service on, say, your query, usually there's not an expectation that they will have authorship, but once they start looking at you, like evaluating your resources, then there might be an expectation that you include them as well in the author list. So just be clear on authorship before you get started, so everyone's on the same page. So authorship criteria to meet: typically substantial contributions or acquisition, analysis, and interpretation, drafting of work and revising it critically for intellectual content, final approval of version to be published, or agreement to be accountable for aspects of the work in terms of accuracy, right, or integrity. So those are criteria that often would qualify someone to be author. Okay, I think that's probably good enough for this. So, and we're out of time anyway.
Yep.
Is there any final questions? Yes, sir.
What is the thing that people commonly do wrong doing this kinds of things? Just to know, like, what's the
What do we?
most recency red flag that you need to avoid? That's a common mistake that people don't do.
I could give one answer to that where I've seen
That's
where there's a time to talk with the faculty and then they say, why didn't you include this search term in your string? And then you're left with, oh, I guess I should have. So I would probably consider meeting with your advisor carefully and reviewing the search terms you've chosen, and maybe even talking beyond that, you know, to the faculty in the classes and things. Ultimately, the HHSE faculty as a group will evaluate this, and so we're all considered, you know, accessible for questions related to this. It's still an exam, so we're not going to be too like hands-on, but we will definitely want you to make sure you're getting to the bulk of the science, so we can review search terms, things like that. Yes.
So would it be poor etiquette if I'm doing a qualifying exam on X topic, and I have an advisor, but they're not specific for that field, but a different person in the department is. Could I go out and ask them to consult?
You should. I think that's the right attitude. And if you talk to them, you say, hey, I'm working on my qualifying exam, they want all of every faculty here wants every PhD student to succeed, right? So as much as this is an exam, it's also chapter one of your dissertation potentially, right? So we want to help you make that a good quality thing. So feedback on, hey, what am I missing? That's very appropriate. I think you become well informed and say, hey, I did everything I could think of with these search terms. Here's what I'm finding. Can you think of anything else I should include?
That's a good one because
Yeah.
I don't know about others, but when approaching somebody that sells your PI,
Yeah.
kind of like
Well, and it's a good thing to come and say, hey, I'm not sure if I'm capturing all the terminology in this problem space, So like especially in the healthcare world, right? So you might have we might in our conversations say the term, well, what sorts of illnesses do they have? And we forget that no, we need to be searching for the term morbidity or morbid asterisk, for all the ways that might be expressed. So that is the kind of thing where you talk to the other smart people around you who are thinking about problems like this and see if they can help with the search terms.
and one thing that I want to ask, are we allowed to talk to each other about
I would
this, or
encourage
is
you
that
to,
like-
yeah. And I would talk to other students in your labs who have gone through this, get their advice. This is what I always say in my lab is this is a learning system. It's not a dictated from the master to the apprentice. It is everybody is learning together in that space, right? So, and we know you guys haven't gone through this before, but there's lots of other people who have. So by all means, hey, ask the senior PhD student, would you mind taking a read through this, see what you think? This is all about improving your work. So as long as it's not you're working with you wouldn't be, the advisors know this, right? But yeah, it's about making this as good as you can with all the resources you have. So I would say when it comes to it, you're going to the writing center and you're saying, help me improve this. You're going back to our librarians and saying, do you see anything I could improve with this? It's seeking that input is kind of part of this.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep, no, I'm glad we covered that. Yep.
So, really briefly, if you're wanting to book a consultation, and I don't know if I'm sharing screen anymore.
You are.
But you can go to the TAMU library. And then here under services or research, so request a consultation. And here under graduate faculty staff consultations, are the folks that help with this. So you
And a lot of our students are doing this. So you might, not to say, hey, Jessie, you're going to get automatically five people banging on your door, but this is why, these are the resources.
David and this guy, chemistry whiz, man, he's like, and that's another thing too. So depending on what it is, most of the time you'll have the person. So Diana Ramirez is actually she's the one who does most of the systematic review stuff in general. So we all have focuses. If we feel like there's some gap that we have, which is which we haven't covered, we may make a referral, but most likely we can just walk you through the process ourselves. And then so this is usually considered, we will see you a couple of times through this process. If it does go beyond that, typically more than a couple of times, then we're sending you to someone like Margaret Foster, and then usually that involves grant money and stuff like that. but we're happy to help with most of the stuff that you're gonna encounter. So,
One thing I'm sorry if I missed it, because I know I was working on my exam stuff. Prisma is one thing that we've used a lot in the past, is
Right.
that method.
right.
Unless I missed it, we didn't go over that in detail here, right? So,
No, so we didn't go over Prisma as a protocol, and there's like a couple of different ones.
Yeah.
Too.
so it's not a requirement, but it is a common structure for guiding the, hey, here's the first thing I did with my search string and I got 14,000 results. Then I did this next thing, like we were talking, I did I removed all the non-English papers. Okay, so having your inclusion and exclusion criteria will help you shape this. But this is how you get from 14,000 down to, okay, here are the final 25 that define, that meet all my criteria and that I'm gonna focus my in-depth.
We did see
analysis
the
on.
Prisma flow. There was an example of that in the slides show where it sort of showed you the pathway of a process, right?
And I'll just leave it at that. Prisma, Prisma. When you get other examples, right? So talking to your other lab mates and stuff, you'll probably see that they will have used that. So they'd be a good question, but you can search how is the Prisma method. I'm sure you could go back and have a specific conversation with librarians about that as well.
You can also, so at the beginning, I showed you the human factors journal, and I did a search for systematic review and narrative review and scoping review. So you can also look at those and see, did they use Prisma? And how did that, what was the, how do you like the way that fit the process in terms of matching what your similar topic that you're looking at, right? So that's another way to make a decision on protocol.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your help. All right, gang. So I will, what I'm gonna do is take this.